Well, today I'm Vyrl Keeter, the same that I have been for 85 years. I was born at Stony Point community, about 4.5 miles west of Stilwell, Oklahoma. I'm a child of Tom and Margaret Keeter. My mother was known as Aunt Ad mostly. There are 8 children in our family. Attended my first school at Mulberry Holler, Indian Day School. One-room school, and was probably a total of maybe 15 students on a real small creek, Mulberry Creek. It was primarily full-blood Indians. And the Keeter family attended there for a couple of years and then moved to the Horn School. We lived about halfway between those two schools. It was 2 miles to the Mulberry School. It was 2 miles to the Horn District School. My mother made a little sailor suit for me when I was a little bitty dude, and I guess my 3rd year in school. I thought I was really something. First day of school, I wore that. That's all I remember about that, but I wore that sailor suit to school. I thought I was a King Joe. At recess and lunch, our primary play was to look for crawfish and such as that along that little creek. And to come back in from recess, we didn't have a bell on the schoolhouse. So the teacher beat on a dishpan with a big spoon, and that's how we knew when to come back in, and we seemed to all get back in and all that. Our main issue is growing up as a child was education.
Right.
All of my family received some type of formal education beyond high school. Kenny Creek, Horn Creek, and Mulberry Creek flowed through our farm. And we had a swimming hole in each one of those. And the other youngsters around would come and swim. And when we were working the fields on our way in the evening back, well, we'd go to the swimming hole first in the creek before we go back home for dinner in the evening, or we called it supper.
Right.
But that was our swimming deal, and where we learned to swim.
All right.
They would be good sized holes. If we were going home for lunch, we'd jump in the swimming hole on the way to lunch. Sometimes Mom would bring, if we were in the fields, she'd bring lunch to us a lot of times. Our chores had hogs, chickens, cows, horses, take care of the livestock. And the livestock produced your food, primarily. We did, we did our plowing with horses and mules. But then we may have been the first family in that area to use tractors for things. And the word was that those Keeter boys would work all night. We like to work at night with those tractors, and then working cattle. It was open range, true open range. And Rocky Mountain was an area that I helped drive down into the area now that is Ten Killer Lake.
How old were you when you started doing this?
Anywhere from 8 years old to, well, from the time I was first going to school, in grade school. That's just part of your life. We did not speak Cherokee at home. And we learned it at school. We didn't learn Cherokee at home. Some of us learned with the other students and children we worked with, and we could all speak some Cherokee.
Right.
My father wasn't Cherokee, but he could communicate. And most of our workers, bean pickers and such, were Cherokee. Some of our that worked us helped us work with the cattle. The main cowboy we used was Sequoia Leach, he and his boys. Along with the crawfishing thing, later I began to see arrowheads, and that's one of the things we talked about was flint rocks, and that's all there is in that community. It's very rocky, rough community. So when we plowed fields and such, my family grew green beans for the fresh markets, and of course we ran cattle on open range, and that was our income totally. I had plenty of time to be out and about, and my whole thing was hunting, fishing, and naturally I'd be along the creeks and those areas where you would find different types of artifacts. But my interest was how the things were made, how the heck, and I asked my granddad. He was not very knowledgeable in the skill of making arrowheads either, and neither were any of the other Cherokees who lived in the area. Seeing those different types of tools and arrow points and such as that were made and we would find was an interesting thing. Intriguing would be a better way to describe what I felt about them, and I'd try to see if I could make some. And I could make as a small boy, probably 12, 13, I could make something that I thought looked like an arrowhead. It probably didn't look too good, but I used another rock, a hammerstone. So it was a self-learned art that I developed. Then my granddad kept telling me that, well, they use a horn. We used a horn to help develop those arrow points. I have stayed with the traditional methods that were used by the ancestry. Baseball was the primary playing, and then on weekends there were a group of neighboring boys who we just rode everywhere we went. We went horseback or walked. We would just go different places horseback and do whatever you do. There might be an old community store. We could stop and get a bottle of soda pop. It was mostly orange or strawberry pop or Royal Crown Cola. You very seldom see it now, but we made slingshots. We call them bean flips. The big thing was to find a certain tree, and the dogwood seemed to be the better ones that had a nice fork in it, and that was what we'd use and get inner tubes from bicycles or tires and make our rubbers to put on that to give the stretch for the bean flips, and we'd squirrel hunt with those. A big deal would be to go have a overnight stay somewhere on the mountain, usually Coon Mountain. We'd catch a chicken somewhere. I don't remember who the chicken belonged to, but we'd roast that old chicken, and that would be our food. On the west side of Coon Mountain, most of it belonged to the Keeters, belonged to my family. There was a large cave that went back under the mountain. That was a favorite thing to do. Different youngsters would go to that area, and we'd play in a cave, and they went back under the mountain, maybe a couple of 100 yards or so. It's a large cave. On the east side of the mountain was some heavy bluff hangovers. That was another area that was famous for the youngsters around the Horn area, Horn and Mulberry area, to meet there and play on, usually be a Sunday afternoon after church. That's a good life. It's a good life.